Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Hunt. I think we're on episode 24 or 25. This is our weekly series dedicated towards helping hiring managers and candidates navigate all the different scenarios that you encounter in the recruiting landscape, whether you're looking for a job or looking to hire talent. So thanks so much for tuning in. For those watching for the first time, I'm Kevin Roth, Managing Director at Advice. We're a boutique recruitment agency serving the New York area for over 38 years now. So I'm happy to be here, and we're coming down to the end of the year. So I figured we touch on a few topics recently that are really most prevalent that we're seeing these days. And I want to talk about today stock compensation, because I think it's something that, from what I know, equity is one of the most powerful words, yet the least understood. So it's a really interesting dynamic. So that's what we're going to be touching on today. And as a reminder, this show is meant to be interactive. Hi, Janessa. Thank you for watching. So just like that, throughout the show, you can throw in your comments and questions. Use the comment box, and I'll be able to get to those throughout the show, especially on a topic like this that is a very misunderstood concept and one that I think I can give some good perspective on, given my time in the industry. And Argentina in the house. I am very excited to eventually visit Buenos Aires. I'd like to go down to Antarctica, so I've heard about that trip. So hopefully one day when I can travel again, that'll be on the agenda. So we're going global. But again, for those first tuning in, today's episode is all about stock compensation and really helping guide you through how it works, what it's all about, and what to look for when you're facing that. And I think it's as topical as ever now, especially here in New York. The tech landscape's exploding. More and more people trying to get into the startup world. People want to get into cool startup companies. Well, a big piece of that becomes the equity that plays a big factor in compensation, because oftentimes you're not going to see as much cash compensation as you would at a large public company. So the equity really becomes a key factor. So that's what we're going to touch on today. And once more, please throw your questions in, comments, subjects you want me to touch on throughout the show, and I'll make sure I save time for those at the end. All right. So I guess the first way to start, the most natural way to start, is really, what are stock options? For those that are watching, you hear equity, you hear stock, it sounds exciting. You're owner technically in the company, you're getting all this equity, and it all seems so great. And then you sit down and see an offer, and you're like, all right, what does this mean? So for all intents and purposes, there's two types of equity compensation. Mainly, you have RSUs and you have options. For the purpose of this show, we're going to focus on stock options. One, because they're much more popular and common, especially in pre-IPO companies. And two, because they're much more complex. So I think it takes a little bit more of an understanding to use this forum to our advantage. So what are stock options? In the simplest form, a stock option gives an employee the option to purchase a share of stock at a predetermined price point, which is often known as either the exercise price or the strike price. So for those that I've already lost in using that terminology, we'll use a basic example. Let's say you go to a company, you get an offer for 10,000 shares of stock, and the strike price is $10. When that company goes public, let's say their share price ends up at $30 a share. You have the option to purchase those shares for $10 each, even though they're trading on the open market at $30. So that's the whole concept of a stock option, is granting you a special option. As an employee, you have these special rights that no other person in the public landscape has, to be able to purchase these shares at this fixed price point when it's granted to you. All right, so thinking in that concept, again, if you have questions on that, throw them in, but hopefully that helps you really visualize the basis of a stock option and why it's valuable. Okay, so understanding stock option comes first. Then I guess the most important thing that everybody wants to know is, how much are they worth? How do you know the value of these options? So the simplest situation is, you're working at a company that's already public. Similar example, let's say you get, I'll make my math easier. Let's say you get 1,000 options and your strike price is $10. Okay. The shares of the stock are trading right now for $30 a share. So if you were an average Joe and went online to your E-Trade account or whatever you use and purchased the share, you'd have to pay $30. Because you have these stock options, you're able to purchase them for $10 a share. So if you take the difference, $30 minus $10, essentially there's $20 in value, $20 in spread there. That is the amount that you gained by being part of this company. So in that same example, if you got $1,000 a share, strike price is $10, current share price on the open market is $30, take the $20 spread, 30 minus 10, times the 1,000 options that you got, and there's $20,000 worth of value that you gained from that option package. Now, again, I'm using very simple words. A lot of situations, you see 5,000 options, 10,000 options, whatever it might be. Okay, so in a already public company, very simple to do that calculation. Where it becomes a little more complex is when you're dealing with companies that haven't yet gone public, because there's no public share price to base it off of. So that's where a little of the risk reward comes, but that's also where the fun comes into play. So how do you figure out how much those options are worth? A lot of times in a discussion with the company, you can find out based on the last 409A valuation, 409A valuation. You can find out, at least get a general sense of what their target share price would be if they went public today based on the number of shares outstanding. And they can often give you a pretty rough idea. It's not always a perfect science. And again, it's pretty arbitrary because this is going to change drastically as the company makes more and more moves to go public, as they raise additional capital. But it will at least give you a general sense of where that value is now. And in that example, it's a similar calculation. If our target price to go public based on our last valuation is $30 a share and your strike price is at $10, same calculation holds true. 30 minus 10, you're getting a net value of $20 per share times the number of options that you got, and that's the incremental value. The difference with pre-IPO to keep in mind, because a lot of people will sit there and say, well, I got 5,000 options, the spread is $10, so it's only like $50,000 worth of value. I thought these options were supposed to make me rich. Well, think of it this way. If a company, the earlier stage of the company, the more potential upside there is for that equity to grow. And also, if you're pre-IPO, if anyone's paying attention today, if you haven't, go look at Airbnb's stock and go look at DoorDash's stock over the past 24 hours. If you are an employee at a company that prices their shares effectively, even though right now we're thinking about $30 a share, that could double or triple or even 10x in a few days based on the market when the company goes public. So those shares could overnight 5x, 6x, 10x the amount, and that's where it really becomes exciting. So don't think of it so much as a set point in time that right now, this is where they're at, this is what my shares are worth, I thought it was supposed to be a lot more. That's the starting point. Pre-IPO, it can only grow if the company's effective. And obviously the risk is it could be the opposite. And the share price could have some struggles. But in terms of valuing your options, the most simplistic form, take the projected price per share, or if it's an already public company, the current price per share, subtract the strike price, and that margin multiplied by the number of options is the incremental value that you're gaining from those shares. Okay, so again, keep your questions coming. We're getting some good questions from Janessa and Anas in terms of some of these concepts, and I know they're foreign to a lot of people. So keep the questions coming, and I'll make sure I get to them at the end. Janessa, I'm going to touch on that subject in a second, and Anas, hopefully that my topic just now helped answer your question. So the next subject is to Janessa's question: when do I get them? When am I able to get these options and take advantage of them? So the standard word that you'll hear is vesting. You've all heard the word vesting. Some know what it means, some don't know what it means. It means something. That's why we're here today. The vesting period is the amount of time it takes for you to actually own those options. So when you start with a company, even though on your offer letter it says you're going to be granted these options, those don't become your property until they vest. So vest essentially used synonymously with earn. Vesting schedule is the schedule in which you're earning those options. Similar to like if you accrue vacation days, for instance. It's a good way to think about it. Over time, you earn those options. Why do they do that? Partly a retention strategy to keep people there. You're waiting for your next vesting schedule. And also because, you should have to earn your way sort of into some sort of equity stake. You're there, a few weeks. They can make an argument. You should really earn your place within the sort of the equity cap table. So vesting used synonymously with earning and the schedule in which you earn those options. Typical vesting schedule, most common, pretty much every single tech company I work with operates on this schedule. The options vest over 4 years with a 1-year cliff. So there we go, cliff, another buzzword term that everyone's sick of hearing. Essentially what that means, when you have a 4-year vesting schedule, that means it's taking 4 years for your options to vest in full. So don't panic. That doesn't mean you don't get anything. You have to stay with a company 4 years before you get anything, I promise. Essentially, that they vest equally over 4 years. The 1-year cliff comes into play in that for that first year, you don't earn any options. At the point of your 1-year anniversary, 1 year of those options are yours. So if you leave in a year and a day, you have that full year vested for you to execute on those options or exercise those options if you want. So you leave in 11 months, you're walking away without any options vested. And the 1-year date, that 1-year cliff, that is when a full year vests. Right after that year period, most companies, your options will then vest monthly for the remaining 36 months of the 4 years, if I'm doing my math correctly. So that same example, if you leave after 13 months, you're going to have a year and 1/36 worth of options vested. So you don't have to wait a whole nother year to get the second wave of 12 months worth of options, okay? So vesting schedule, think of the schedule at which you earn these options. And in terms of what you should look out for, most common and what I see in most situations is a 4-year vesting schedule with a 1-year cliff, meaning nothing for the first year. You hit that 1-year anniversary, you have a year's worth of options. After that, each month you're getting 1/36 of the remaining options until you make that 4-year time period. So hopefully that helps give everyone some context. Again, you have questions, please keep chiming in. All right. Last topic that I hear a lot of people ask, all right, so now I know what the stock options are. I know how much they're worth. I know when I get them. Can I get more of them? So the answer to this question is yes, in a basic form. And the times at which you can do that, number one, and most importantly, when you're negotiating your offer. Right at the get-go, options, usually more so than salary, are somewhat negotiable when it comes to finalizing a package especially at a pre-IPO startup type company. So in your negotiation, get a sense, market value, find out, talk to your recruiter, get a realistic understanding of this company, what their typical option package is, and if they feel that there's some maneuvering there and wiggle room, but within reason. If you're at a company and you're at a leveling with 5,000 options, more often than not, you're thinking, maybe there's 10 to 20% kind of wiggle room to bump up those options a little bit, maybe throw you a couple hundred extra options, but you're not going to see a situation in which you go from 5,000 to 15,000. Usually these things are within certain bands and certain leveling, but when it comes to options, number one place you can get more is in the upfront negotiation when discussing your compensation package. The second place that you should really ask about, in these negotiations is ask if there's additional grants, if there are opportunities for additional grants. And a lot of companies do have programs in place that allow mostly higher level employees, senior management, senior leadership to earn additional grants based on certain company milestones, certain performance milestones, or just being a top performer overall for the company. So absolutely ask that question at the forefront. If you're not thrilled with where the options are right now, maybe, but there's opportunity to earn more, that might be a distinguishing factor in whether this opportunity is right for you. So you can absolutely get additional options throughout the process as long as you, one, ask in the upfront negotiation, and two, find out if that company has any plan in place for refresh grants or additional grants as you're employed and as you hit certain milestones. All right, so with that said, I want to get to a few questions. We talked about what options are. We talked about how to figure out and calculate the value of them. We talked about when you get them and waiting out the vesting schedule. And then we talked about, can you get more of them? So any other questions that everyone has, I would love to get to those. I want to talk to a few of these that I might not have touched on appropriately. So Janessa asks, can you cash out your options while you're still working at the company? Absolutely. As long as your options are vested and the company is already public or they've already gone through the exit event where those options are executable. Remember, if you're pre-IPO company, there's nothing to cash out. They don't have public stock yet. Once the company goes public, as long as you've met your vesting period, you can then execute on your options. So you can absolutely cash them out while you're still employed. Typically, you have to wait a certain time period because if the company has an amazing IPO, they can't have every single employee dumping their shares to cash out and run away with the money because the stock price would be drastically affected. So there's typically some sort of waiting period after the quote-unquote event happens, but you can absolutely cash out options while you are still there as long as they are vested. All right. So hopefully that helps, Janessa. And you had a follow-up question. What if the stock goes public at the price the company offers? So I'm guessing you mean the strike price. So if the company ends up going public at the same as the strike price, that's part of the risk of being pre-IPO and getting pre-IPO equity. You hope that the company's planned things out. They've done things effectively. They've paced themselves. They've targeted a projected price that's going to make sense, where that spread's going to be as great as possible. But if it so happens that the company ends up going public at a price at or below the strike price, then those options really become worthless. It's not like you have to pay a penalty. You're not forced to execute your options. So, Janessa, you're never going to have a situation where because that happens, now you're forced to lose money. But essentially, your options now became somewhat worthless because if they're at the same price that they're public at, you could have just been anybody, not necessarily an employee, and you could have gone on and bought those options and bought that stock. So you hope, and the benefit is when that company really does have an effective trajectory, and that's where it comes to believing in the company. If you really like the people, the team, you look at leadership, they're on a great trajectory, company's doing well, then part of your buying into that is understanding I'm betting on these guys that they're going to do things the right way, and that spread between my strike price, what I can buy the shares at, and what the ultimate share price is as great as possible so that value is really there. All right. So hopefully that helps, Janessa. But thanks for the questions. And in terms of other questions, so Albert talked about the tax impact. Albert, thank you so much. So I am not a tax expert. So please do not hold me to this. I would encourage you to speak to a CPA, speak to your accountant when it comes to tax impact. From what I do understand, the way taxes work is at the time you execute the options, the spread between your strike price and the ultimate share price, that margin is taxable in the year in which you execute the options. And then any residual gains, as long as you hold the stock, once you own that stock, you have a long-term capital gains tax that you have to think about once you ultimately sell. But when you do execute those options, there is a tax that you're going to pay on that spread, because essentially that's money that you've earned. That's taxed as ordinary income. So that'll be taxed on your income from what I know. But again, Albert, please don't hold me to that. Ask your CPA, accountant, someone that could do that. That's just a general knowledge that I have of it. Janessa asked, can you opt out? Janessa, all great questions. So essentially, you're not being forced to ever execute your options. You can just let those sit there. You never have to execute them if you don't want to. So in terms of opting out, I guess if that's the way you kind of define it, you can absolutely think of things in that way and just never execute the options, and it all goes away. I mean, one of the biggest examples I think is WeWork recently, and I'm sorry for any WeWork employees that are watching, but they were skyrocketing and the valuation was going out off the charts. Everyone bought into equity. A lot of employees, really bought into their equity packages and were so excited to see that thing go public. They were so close to going public. And then everything kind of tanked, and now a lot of those options are less than what they would have been. A lot of them are worth next to nothing, and they're just not going to execute on them. The options aren't worth anything. They kind of just, it all sort of takes care of itself. All right, so hopefully these questions were helpful in giving you some context. Again, I think it's important to understand what these options are, because so many people just get excited. They hear equity, they're pumped up, they're psyched. This is amazing. I'm getting equity in the company. But it's important to really understand what it is and how it works. So I really hope this session helped inform a lot of you on what options are, how long it takes to get them, how you can execute on them, and if you can get more of them. But as always, if you have any questions, please send me questions. You can connect with me right through the link. I'm tagged to this post. You can connect with me anytime and send me messages or questions that you have. Continue to comment on this feed if you're watching when we're not live. I get back to those comments throughout the course of the week, and I'll make sure I answer any questions that come in residually. And as always, make sure you follow and share this with your network, especially if you have friends that are looking to get into the tech world or the startup world. Huge, huge, huge factor is understanding the equity and being realistic about it. But I thank everyone for watching, and we're on like 24, 25 episodes. It's really amazing to think how long we've kept this going. It's because of the viewers and the comments and the questions. It really keeps me energized about bringing this knowledge and insight to everyone watching. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed another episode of The Hunt, and we'll see you next week for probably what will be the season finale so that I can finally check out. I am getting married this Saturday. Jenna Fox is hopefully watching, future Jenna Roth, and we will be off the grid for a week or so just checking out. So I think next week will be the season finale. But I thank everyone for tuning in. Have a great rest of the week and weekend. And we'll be back next week with the potential season finale of The Hunt. Talk to you soon.